done a lot of research around this, Raymond. Why have you decided to look into this topic?
It's actually a long path. It took me quite a while to reach this point, but I started off by trying to understand why projects fail. And that's actually what my PhD research was about. I worked with Standards Australia, and we decided to reinvestigate all the common accepted wisdom. And I found out that all the things that people tell us to do to succeed. So for example, have a methodology, get the user involved, get the best team you can. None of that is bad advice. But it turns out the most important thing for projects to succeed is top management support. If you don't have top managers engaged in your project, it is really hard to succeed. And then I took the next step and said, well, what does the project management textbook tell me about that? Or what does the certification teach me about engaging with the top manager? And the answer is nothing, or almost nothing. You go through any project management textbook and ask yourself, where's the chapter on risk? There it is. Where's the chapter on time? There it is. Where's the chapter on top management support? Flick, 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 flick. It's not there. You might get half a page. So I realized that most textbooks, the conventional approach, doesn't emphasize the one thing you need to do to succeed. Right. And that's to engage with the top management in an effective way.
Right. James, has that been your experience on the ground when you've worked on projects?
It definitely is, yeah. I mean, lack of buy-in from top management certainly is a key contributor to, and we've done hundreds of reviews right across Australia and broader in the UK as well. So our finding is definitely that if the sponsor is not actively involved in the project, then it has a high chance of failure. It's interesting, just listen to Raymond's collection of degrees, and obviously now as a professor at university. For me, it wasn't until I became a teacher, so I'm an approved trainer in Prince2 Agile, MSP, P3O, and Agile Shift, P3O being the PMO management framework. It wasn't until then that I've truly got to understand the value of these methods, because when you're training people, you've got to know the methods obviously better than they do, so you can train them, and like any teacher. So for me, I think that's the challenge, that although the methods don't actually explicitly state, you need to make sure your sponsor's on board, actually it's implicitly within the methodologies. So if you read sufficiently into them, in Prince2 is a good example, it talks about organization, and it talks about the roles and responsibilities, and then it talks about what it calls the executive, which is the sponsor, and how critical that role is and how they're ultimately accountable for the success of the project. And then when I go and review organizations which are allegedly using Prince2, and I look for a RACI matrix, so who's responsible, accountable, to be consulted, to be informed, often there's multiple A's. A being accountable, and you can't share accountability. That's one of those golden rules. So again, it's just the application of these methodologies and frameworks. It's not necessarily that they're wrong, they're just not applied effectively. And I think that's where assurance comes in. So yes, I agree with Raymond's that you do need active sponsorship, and you need support of the project and program managers to actually deliver, and that support needs to be independent of them and potentially independent of the sponsor as well, so that there isn't a misreporting, etc.